starts glowing and the film starts rolling. You wanna be knowing what you might be in for. So give the show a listen and find out what you're missing. Put yourself in position for the easy good score. Dan and Brian, gonna give you the goods. You know we won't be lying. Gonna give you the goods. Masterpiece or trash. Gonna give you the goods. That's why you gotta listen. Gonna give you the goods. Action.
Hi, everyone, and welcome to The Goods, a film podcast. We've got a full house tonight. How are you doing, Dan?
Hey, Brian. I'm hanging in there. This is episode 251.
Big numbers.
And I always love it when we pull in some fresh voices. And it's not just one fresh voice, but two.
These aren't fresh voices. Fresh in a different way.
But we, for the second time here, are having on two McDowells at once. So Gavin has been our guest several times, very often to discuss a film related to religion, because that is his area of expertise. I guess profession, you're an academic, so you have strong background and can always correct us. You're also European, so you can correct us when we make mistakes about anything that's like outside of our narrow view of the United States. So we're always grateful for Gavin to show up and have something to say. And this is the second appearance of Gavin's father, Kevin, who maybe you can reintroduce yourself to us, Kevin. You are a lawyer by background. Is that correct?
That's correct. Yeah, that's why I wrote my name as Kevin C. McDowell, Esquire. It's a way of underscoring the fact that I actually did something for a living once. No, I've been an attorney since 1981. Also been a teacher at various universities and high schools when I taught high school as well. I've had a great deal of experience in the law and including with jury trials, which is one of the reasons why I was invited to this. Well, actually, two reasons. Gavin was astounded, as you guys were, that I had never seen My Cousin Vinny. And the reason I didn't see it is because I thought it was just a comedy, and I don't really like courtroom comedies. You know, the first one was like 1936 with the Three Stooges, which personifies stupidity, and it was called Disorder in the Court. And that pretty much killed me for comedies. But I was surprised. My Cousin Vinny is more than just a comedy. A lot of lawyers who had seen it actually liked it. So I was anxious to see it myself, to see how it comports with courtroom behavior, especially with the jury trial. Jury trials are one of the more terrifying things you can do as a lawyer, and most lawyers who have any sense do what they can to avoid them. And in this case, well, we'll wait till we get to it, but you have a person who has absolutely no experience whatsoever in criminal law and in courtroom procedure, but he has lots of chutzpah, and he's hoping to get by on that. Fortunately, he has a really smart fiance.
Kevin is, for reasons he said, a excellent guest for this episode, and indeed the film is My Cousin Vinny, which is a film from 1992. It is one that Brian and I have, through the years of this podcast, professed reverence towards. Maybe that's overstating it, but one that we're fond of, at least.
I think we both put it on our top 100 favorite films. Is that correct? Was it on did it crack your list, Dan?
Oh, it was definitely on mine. I didn't remember. Was it on yours?
Yes. Well, maybe not when we recorded our episode 18 months ago or whatever, but I realized my omission if it was not included, and it's on there now.
Okay.
Definitely one that I appreciate. And so this seed was kind of planted the last time that Gavin and Kevin and Dan and I were all together when we discussed Inherit the Wind, which was about the Scopes monkey trial. So kind of lay at the crux of both Gavin and Kevin's background as a religious trial movie. And we talked about some other courtroom films, title dropped them in our discussion, and My Cousin Vinny came up, and we determined that, yes, Kevin hadn't seen it. And so I said, and we just kind of all agreed, someday there should be a My Cousin Vinny episode of The Goods, and now the day has come.
And I think some of the context that Kevin gave there a minute ago, that this film has a reputation for, among actual lawyers, as maybe having more to it than, well, one, you might expect from a comedy film, and two, even relative to other films that are a little bit more serious, has a little bit more truth in what the jury trial experience is like. And so I guess I'm glad that that was on Kevin's mind, and I think that will be interesting to talk through. What about this felt authentic? What about this felt maybe somewhat authentic but heightened? And what about it just felt like an outright cartoon? So I think that will be fun. This film stars Joe Pesci. Pesci's had a long career, and he's been in a lot of beloved movies. Very well known for being in the gangster films because he's got that kind of Italian-American persona, this New York Goodfella persona, and indeed Goodfellas might be his most famous role.
Goodfellas is indeed his most popular role on Letterboxd.
Okay.
Followed by Home Alone.
Yeah, well, forget that.
I completely forgot he was one of the Wet Bandits.
He wants you to forget that too.
Yeah, and then The Irishman, which I don't know why. And then Home Alone 2, and then Casino. Well, it takes a while before you get to My Cousin Vinny. I can't believe that.
So what I always say is this is, like, for me, the default Joe Pesci persona on screen, which is probably not true. I mean, I don't know if he has a default mode, but like, this is the one I've seen the most, and this is the one I most associate with Pesci. It's sort of a Pesci star vehicle. One thing this film became known for is it actually had a surprising Oscar win, and that is the co-star, Marisa Tomei, I think you pronounce it.
Mm-hmm.
This was pretty early in her career. She plays the fiance of the Joe Pesci character, who is the lawyer here. The Joe Pesci character is the lawyer. And yes, Mona Lisa is her name, which is a great Italian name. She is not just there to be eye candy, although she is very beautiful, and not just there to bounce off of Pesci, but her character ends up having a pretty direct involvement in the unfolding of the trial in ways that are very funny. She ended up winning Best Supporting Actress, which was both a surprise because this is not the kind of role that typically wins that kind of Oscar, and at first was kind of regarded as a mistake. Maybe I'm just in echo chambers of people who like this movie. I feel like its reputation as an undeserved win has diminished over time, and now people say, well, she's awesome in it, and we don't respect comedy actors, comic performances quite enough. So I think probably maybe it was the right choice, or at least it was not an embarrassment of a choice. And she is very, very funny in this, and in moments that we will talk about for sure.
Whether her win was earned or not, it's still over at the alternate ending Discord, and I guess I'm representative of alternate ending as someone who writes for that movie website. It's generally assumed that she did earn the win, and you have the naysayers who have to defend their choice. First of all, they have to remember who the other nominees were, and then they have to state their case. And it's a back and forth, but I think Marisa has the upper hand nowadays. And it's kind of in the same wheelhouse of, like, sometimes they throw a bone to popular films. Aunt Gladys won just this past Oscar season. I shouldn't remember the name, the famous
Weapons, yeah.
Amy Madigan.
Yes, Amy Madigan.
Yes, winning for just being a standout role in a film that otherwise did not get any awards recognition. And I think it's kind of the same thing here. Marisa stands out in more ways than one is her loud costumes and her critical role in the plot.
I also think a little bit of Martin Landau winning for playing Bela Lugosi in Ed Wood.
So the supporting actor and supporting actress roles have developed a reputation over the decades as being maybe not a toss 'em a bone one, but a place where you kind of recognize a film that otherwise didn't get a whole lot of attention, but has some good flavor to it, And like, so here's a piece of the flavor, and we're kind of honoring that. And in some ways it's like usually a quirky performance, but something where you're also kind of honoring the overall film.
I had another thought just occurred to me, so I'm going to interrupt you again. Is when did Anthony Hopkins take home his statue for Hannibal Lecter? It must have been the year before, right?
Right, 1991.
That's kind of the same thing.
Although in that case, the film
It
swept.
won a lot of statues. Yeah, but still, it's not the kind of film that usually wins Oscars, and that was controversial for a slightly different reason, not because of the quality of the performance, but because of the quantity of the screen time. Was it Best Actor that he won?
I think so, and yeah, least screen time for a lead actor is like 16 minutes that he's actually shown.
But it's kind of the same thing in the sense that it's not like it's a role that just commands a whole lot of attention to itself, regardless of the film it's in or like the amount of screen time. So apologies for interrupting you again.
You are banned from the podcast for this. I'm just kidding.
You're gonna hold him in contempt.
Too quick.
So you had said that this was your first time seeing it, Kevin, and Brian and I have both seen this film many, many times. One thing I'll just toss out there is this and A Few Good Men, two movies that have very memorable courtroom scenes at their climax, were two of my dad's favorite movies. And in particular, he would just turn on the second halves of these movies. And in both cases, that's probably colored my impression that I think they have much better second halves than first halves. Many of these line readings and exchanges are like seared in my memory to the point that like I forget a lot of what's in it, and yet it still feels like it's a movie of like just kind of the best, biggest moments that really, really stick with me. But just to say that this was one of my dad's favorite movies. My dad passed away a few years ago. So it makes me nostalgic thinking about the times I watched it with my dad and with my family.
Yeah, so I was curious about our past exposure to this film. I think I saw it first sometime in high school, and then, I don't know, caught it a second time somewhere in the in-between, probably around when we did our 100 movies talk. Dan, I thought, you know what? My Cousin Vinny, I really liked that one. I should watch that again. And so it was fresh-ish in my mind before this week, but not one that I had on frequent repeat.
And Gavin, it sounds like you had been familiar with it. So you've seen this one a couple times before?
I'd seen it once before in my college days. I went to college between 2004 and 2008. DVDs, of course, have been around for a long time. There's DVDs and Blu-rays, but you still had VHS systems. So I saw this film on a video home system cassette tape, as my local half-price books sold them for 50 cents a piece, and they were trying to get rid of all of them. And so whenever I was home from college, I would go and check out their VHSs and buy as many as I could. And we have an estimable library of VHSs that we can no longer play because you no longer have VHS players in circulation. They're all extinct. That's how I saw a lot of great films, including Goodfellas. I always noticed there was always a copy of Legends of the Fall, and I never saw that one. It made me wonder why did they make so many VHS copies of Legends of the Fall? It was like some Brad Pitt movie from the mid-90s. Edward Zwick, I think, the guy that did Glory. But yeah, so anyway, it was from breaking that. I watched it on VHS in my basement. And I know Dad walked in on me watching it because he made comments already about practicing law across state lines, which we'll refer to. And I got the impression that he had seen it before, but he hadn't. One of our relatives is actually a big fan of this film, my maternal uncle, and his son used to talk up My Cousin Vinny, which is like not really a recommendation. I don't consider them to have a very sophisticated sense of humor. They also talk a lot about Team America, World Police, which is a funny movie, but not a very sophisticated one. And seeing the songs from that, and I thought My Cousin Vinny would be kind of the same thing, and that is not correct. So I'm glad I did see it then, and I'm glad I resaw it because I had forgotten a lot of things about it while retaining many other things.
One thing I want to just throw in here that I meant to say when we opened the episode and introduced the both of you, but I was able to envision you watching this film on VHS because since we last recorded, I had the pleasure of traveling to your hometown at the same time that you traveled to your hometown in Indianapolis. And so we got to hang out at the place where you grew up. And I met Kevin in person, and I met some other people in your family. And we got to watch an old film noir in your basement. And that was a very fun time. Not on VHS. We watched it on, I think it was a Blu-ray or DVD. I'm not sure, but
It was probably a DVD. It was probably a DVD.
it was, what was that one called? Oh, Out of the Past. That's
Out of
right.
the past.
Yeah. I like that one. That's an excellent one.
Couple things to chime in with. I have, I think, 2 VCRs hooked up right now, operational. I also have a side hustle that I digitize tapes. So if anybody has that requirement, I can hook you up. I've had to do it for the podcast a few times when Gavin was present.
I'm not sure I have any VHS tapes that I love that much. Just the idea is that they were cheap. Is Evil Roy Slade available on DVD? Because that was a treasured VHS tape. I felt like I had found the Holy Grail when I saw that. Not many others. I think Dad, you have to go through them, see if there are any. There's some I never got to, and now I can't watch them.
Actually, you can. We have the VCR is in the dining room. Not the dining room, but where we eat. That TV there still plays VCRs. It's still a VCR.
I can't imagine a worse place to watch a movie.
Critical.
Definitely not where you want to watch like Heat or, I don't know. Silence of the Lambs was one of those VHS tapes I watched. I can't imagine watching Legends of the Fall in like that big open space. That's anyway.
Silence of the Lambs does deal with a lot of recipes that go well with Chianti.
Yeah. So imagine watching Silence of the Lambs while eating dinner. There we go.
Oh man, do you guys remember that show that was on like TBS, the Superstation, for a little while called Dinner and a Movie, where it would be a movie presentation show,
yeah.
but then at the breaks it was a cooking show, and they would cook something related to the movie. And I wonder if they ever did a broadcast of Silence of the Lambs.
That's kind of funny.
Probably not. That wasn't usually their demographic.
I could see them doing My Cousin Vinny, though. And you make, here's how you make grits or something.
Well, yeah, we've learned a lot about grits. Now, that's true. If you're down south, and I lived down south for a couple of years, it seems like everything they serve is served with grits, and it's never instant grits. Even the jurors, mocked that. Anybody who'd use instant grits, not a true Southerner.
Right. Self-respecting Southerner. That's the term they use.
Self-respecting Southerner. Yeah, we're not there yet, but that actually resonated. It was funny. It also ruined the timeline for the witness.
Kevin, you said that you had done some jury cases. Can you maybe just give us a little bit of background? Like, what was your career like? What type of? You sound like you did education law.
Well, I did do that, but before I did that, though, I was in insurance defense law. So anything that can be insured, you're going to be provided counsel. So the insurance companies will provide counsel to their insured if they're, if one, they're being sued, or two, the insurance company has paid off and they're trying to recover what they call subrogation. And those end up in jury trials from time to time if you can't get them settled. If 2 insurance companies are more involved, the chances are better that it's going to get settled. If the other side is uninsured or underinsured and you're dealing with a substandard insurer, you're almost certainly going to have to go to trial or threaten it. And if you threaten it, you better be prepared to do it. So I've had 23 jury trials, which is a lot. As far as when I did education law, I would be usually second chair because the attorney general would represent the state and I would assist them in the trials. So yes, we've had, and I can't tell you how many courtroom trials, how many court trials I've had. There have been hundreds. When you watch a movie, for me, when I watch My Cousin Vinny, of course, I'm going to be looking at it critically to see, what is plausible and what is not. And I already knew that a lot of attorneys did like the movie, but what they really liked about the movie was actually near the end, where he's actually presenting his case, because there are a lot of things that raise eyebrows, even among members of the bar, before you get that, including the way the judge acted towards Vinny. Now, Vinny's a dumbass. I mean, he is. He's a fish that's out of water 3 different ways: regionally, culturally, and legally. He's out of his element completely. but not knowing that you wear a shirt and a tie and a proper coat into court, he should have known better than that. Even if he intended to go watch a jury trial, but he never actually ever saw one, which is kind of funny and also dangerous. I can't believe, that he would go and do that. The other thing too is that this movie really takes a huge risk. It was marketed as a comedy, but a capital crime, charge of murder, that's a serious matter. And, when I first saw it, I said, don't tell me they let a foreign attorney come into their courts representing someone in a capital crime without requiring local counsel and things like that. Well, it turns out in Alabama, you actually can do that. There are prerequisites that would have really forestalled Vinny in this particular case, what we call the pro hoc vice process. And that is where the court can't allow him as an out-of-state attorney to come in and represent somebody in a capital crime. You can't do that in Indiana. And most states, you can't just come in and do that on your own. But in Alabama, you can, provided it's pro bono. In other words, you're not charging. And he's not charging. It's his cousin. Oh, excuse me. It's Bill and Bill's friend Stan that he's representing. So he's not charging them. And he comes down to Alabama in 1990, I think 91 or 92, whenever he and Lisa come down there with what, $800 in traveler's checks?
Right.
I mean, they do get the $200 from the pool game.
That's right. So we're diving into it here. So
I have a question for the others here. Have any of you actually served on a jury?
Okay, so I did want to talk about our respective legal experience, which I have not been on a jury. I have a couple times been called for jury duty, but been able to weasel out of them both times. But what I wanted to say is that in high school, I took a 1-semester elective that was like bare bones introduction to what is law. It was called Street Law. It was taught by Mr. David Zack at TJ. And it was just a short little crash course. But I learned about some things in that semester that I would have to imagine Vinny would learn in law school, that he seems ignorant of.
Right. Definitely implausible that he knew as little as he did, despite having gone to law school.
Actually, not entirely. Not entirely. There's a great quote in that movie by Vinny. When Lisa says, "Don't you know this stuff?" With her chin stuck out. I mean, she's really got the Brooklyn thing down. But he says in law school, they teach you all kinds of stuff about precedent and, and stuff like that. But you only learn procedure when you go to your first law firm. That's actually pretty true.
Interesting. Okay.
So you don't learn about jury trials because you're not being taught by lawyers who are trial lawyers. They're academics. They're like Gavin. They're useless. That's not true. But see, most of them are not jury lawyers. So you don't learn a lot about procedure in law school. It's a great quote. It probably didn't stick with you, but I can guarantee you every lawyer who saw that film, and there must be millions of them because it's popular, probably nodded in agreement when Vinny made that statement about you don't really learn about jury trials in law school.
I was also questioned by the police once because I donated a stack of magazines to the library, and then before they were like taken into the system, or maybe the library threw them away, but somebody took the pile and used it to start a fire somewhere.
Oh, no.
And they had my name on the magazines. And so I relate to that aspect of this story as well.
I have served on a jury, and it was for a murder case.
Whoa, really?
Yeah, and it was accessory to murder, or maybe felony murder. I don't know what the difference is between those two things. But the guy didn't actually kill the guy, but he was there. So it was a group of street youths
Utes.
Yes, they go out one night, and their plan was to rob a Mexican. That was a quote that was read into the record, and they ended up killing a guy, like holding him up and then shooting him.
Oh my gosh.
And it was one of the three that was on trial. That was a pretty formative experience. It was one of the last things I did before leaving for France. Lasted a whole week, and I had deliberations. So whenever I see movies about, like, the jury is not a huge focus of this film. They are there. Like movies like 12 Angry Men, or especially Juror Number Two, for some reason resonated with me because one of the things they tell you that jurors should never do, or one of the jurors does it, and he gets punished for it. And that made me so happy. It's one of those that they fuck around with in movies.
Brian has complained about that in 12 Angry Men, that we're kind of going all over the place here, but that in 12 Angry Men, the jury, which is obviously the focus of 12 Angry Men, goes far beyond the type of deliberation and investigation that juries are typically supposed to do.
Right. They're introducing their own evidence.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Don't bring weapons into the deliberation room. Okay, that's just a pro tip for life. And the other thing that while we're on this film and we're distracted, the other thing that amazed me is they asked to look at the murder weapon. They just bring it.
Right.
That seems non-standard to me, but the 50s were a different time.
You also can't bring a Bible into the jury room. Vast majority of people don't know that, but you cannot take your Bible into the jury room.
Because you can hurt people with it? Or
Well, yeah. I mean, if you use it the way Evil Roy Slade did, but no, people use their Bible as a law book, and you can't consider matters outside of the record as it's been presented to you.
that interesting. Okay, well, unfortunately, that doesn't bear My Cousin Vinny. That's
Arcane knowledge.
I don't think we even learned a single juror's name.
No, they're relatively minor, although there's a couple of them.
One of them has a line, one of the great lines.
Brian.
Yeah, okay, you guys are going. We're
Talking about if they're on board with the death penalty. So I'll speak about. Brian asked, what's our experience? We know Kevin has been a lawyer in many. You had the number. What was it, 23?
I've had 23 complete juries. I've been in other jury trials, but they settled before they completed. So I've had 23 complete jury trials. None of those were criminal. I was acquitted. No. These were all civil trials. So, in Vinny's case, you're dealing with a criminal trial, and there's a heck of a lot more at stake than money, obviously.
So my experience, a few things to throw in here. One, the street law class that Brian mentioned, I didn't actually take that, but my friend did, and he told me some of the things about it. And one thing that I don't know, I think was probably said in jest, but was conveyed to me, was that if you get arrested, he'll bump up your grade because that means you're going to get an experience with the legal system.
Yeah, that's true. I'll let you finish your thought, but I heard a euphemism recently for convicts as justice-involved persons, and you would be a justice-involved person at that point.
So that anecdote that you got a grade bump or an A or something if you were arrested very much tickled me when I was in high school, and I participated in a playwriting competition, and I wrote my play about two friends. One of them is about to fail his street law class if he doesn't get arrested that night. So it was like a goofy comedy where they're trying to get arrested and it keeps getting undercut by something. But sad story, I can't find that file anywhere. Last year I spent like an hour searching for it on all my old backups and I couldn't find it. So I would be curious to go back and read that at some point. But my own legal history, I have had one time I got in trouble in high school because me and that same friend actually made what we called dry ice bombs. They weren't really bombs, but what you did is you took dry ice, you put it in a 2-liter bottle of soda that has been emptied and refilled with water, or it could just be half full of soda. And then you screw the top back on and then you throw it and it goes kaboom. Well, we did that, except we did it on private property. It was our other friend's church parking lot. And there happened to be a policeman nearby who came and talked to us. And he thought we were setting off real bombs. I mean, I guess we kind of were, it's an exploding thing, but we weren't damaging property. It was literally only the popping bottles. There was like no actual destruction involved, you know? He questioned us really seriously. And I had just turned 18. Another friend who was with us had just turned 18. But the one friend that I talked about who took that class, who's one of my best friends named Tyler, he was like a month away from turning 18. So the policeman wouldn't let him go. He made his parents come pick him up. So we had to stay there and wait with our friend for over an hour while his friend's parents, who were like all the way across the county, drove over and picked him up, really. I mean, honestly, you're just like, okay, he's good to go. And then he just drove away because it was his car that was there. The funny thing was, while we were waiting there, the bomb sniffing dogs came by because I guess he called it in that he had heard an explosion. So they sent the bomb sniffing dogs while we were just sitting there waiting for my friend Tyler's parents to come. That was the closest I've ever come to being arrested for a serious crime. Now, I did have a misdemeanor reckless driving charge when I was in my early 20s from an accident that I caused. And I have an interesting story of that, which is that
I think you've told this story on The Goods, haven't you? Because
I
I
probably
know
have.
this story, and I don't know how I would know this story except by listening to your tell-all podcast.
well, then I'll do the short version of it, which is that the cop who charged me had a reputation, according to the lawyer that I got, of being a hard ass, for lack of a better term, not willing to settle, always grilling and fighting. And he refused to settle with my lawyer, tried to get it reduced to something or other. I don't know exactly. So it was going to go to trial. And so we got a continuance, which meant we had to come back a different date. And when we came back and none of the witnesses were there. And this cop apparently hadn't filed the subpoena type thing correctly. And he started yelling at the judge.
Always a good tactic.
Yeah.
Oh,
The other guy, who's the person, what's the name of the record keeper who's in the court with the judge?
It's
I don't
just
know.
a stenographer. It's a court reporter.
Someone, I don't know, someone else, maybe it was they weren't in the room, but like yelling that this person never processes the subpoenas correctly and stuff. My attorney was like, can we just get this dismissed because of whatever's going on over here? And the judge said, I'm going to give you what's called, I had never heard of this term before, a nulla proce or something like that, which
That's right.
is kind of like the way that it was explained to me is that it's a little bit like a dismissal, except it doesn't prevent you from getting charged again. So unlike a normal dismissal is like double jeopardy, you can't be charged again. But this one, if the cop was really vindictive, he could have come and charged me again for that.
Refiled.
Yes.
Mhm.
And it was a 1-year statute of limitations. So I was like, when that year was almost up, I was like sweating, like, is it going to come in? Is it going to come in? And then I never got recharged for it. So I somehow ended up like completely off the hook for an accident that I caused and honestly should have been like paid money to the government for my error. But I got off the hook on that one because of the cop who was yelling at the judge. So hope that cop and that judge are good wherever they are these days.
Okay, so I had not heard that story before, so that must have been an off-pod conversation. But
Okay.
no, it's
I don't know.
good.
Okay.
My only other street law anecdote that I'll sprinkle in right now is half the semester was on tort law, civil law, lawsuits, and half was on criminal law. And in the criminal half, we did like a mock trial where the class was kind of split up into a defense team and a prosecution team. And, you know, somebody was a judge and some of the people were jurors. And I got the role of defense attorney, and I was dating the prosecuting attorney at the time. And so that was dramatic. It felt dramatic. It felt like it could be a movie. But then the problem was when we got to the trial and like actually did it, like the two of us were very invested in the outcome, but like the rest of the kids in the class didn't care. It's like, I guess, you know, we lobbied for our roles and wanted to know how it was all going to turn out. And it was like, I don't know if the other kids even read the paperwork that they were supposed to read. The payoff was not satisfying. I don't remember who won.
Well, if you don't remember, then say you did.
Yes. I think the ultimate fate was that the more serious charges, the defendant was acquitted, but it did get convicted of some lesser charge.
Well, shall we dive into My Cousin Vinny?
Oh, yeah.
Last year.
But
Sure.
so when this movie opens, we first meet two young men, and they're New Yorkers. That's how they're described, as New Yorkers. And they're driving on a cross-country road trip. Their ultimate destination is California. I think they're going to go to college. But they're passing through Alabama. So I kind of want to see that on a map. I want to know what actually the route was, because I could think you could go from New York to California without ever being in Alabama, but that's where they are.
They say they chose the route because they heard it was scenic. I think they say something to that effect.
There was also another reason why they chose to go south, and that is it's in January.
Right.
I'm glad that you mentioned that. They are not dressed like it's January.
No, it's like, even like, I mean, come on, they're not in Florida. Even in Alabama, it's cold in January, right? I had that question because it very clearly takes place in January and February.
Mm-hmm.
They listen to the court dates. That wasn't my immediate concern.
There should be more coats.
I don't think it's established, in the opening scenes. I was like, also, they're going to college in January? I don't know. That's not important. Not important.
Yeah, they both have scholarships to UCLA, and they had been attending college in New York. Yeah, we don't really know much more than that. But we do know that they chose to go down that way because, one, it's scenic, and two, then, practically, Alabama is going to be warmer than heading straight from New York across the top part of the United States in January.
That's fair enough. The character of focus in this first bit is the Karate Kid, Ralph Macchio. And his name is Bill Gambini. We're ultimately going to meet his cousin Vinny because they run into some legal trouble on this road trip. And what this whole movie is really is a story of mistaken impressions. You form a first impression and you get it wrong. Because they stop at this convenience store and Bill inadvertently pockets a can of tuna and they leave, and shortly thereafter are picked up by the police. And their assumption is, oh, this is because I didn't pay for that can of tuna that I took. But no, it's murder charges. Somehow, as soon as they walked out the door, the clerk was murdered.
Right.
Clerk of the store.
So a couple things on what you just said, Brian. So one, I just want to toss out there, Ralph Macchio. I have liked him in everything I've seen him in. Like, I don't know why he didn't go on to be, I don't know, like a Kevin Bacon or something, like someone who's always showing up and you think maybe he gets an Oscar nomination every now and then, but he seems to have just kind of vanished.
He was just in Karate Kid Legends last year.
Okay.
The Netflix show Cobra Kai was
that's
regular in that. That was pretty big. Well, he was coasting on his Karate Kid fame.
Yeah. It seems like he should have had a big prestige drama arc, though. But, Brian, you say this whole movie is about mistaken impressions, and I would say the first half of this movie is about mistaken impressions. There's like 7 scenes where the gag is somebody thought the wrong thing about someone, or they even extend it so far as like they're talking about different things, but like ever so carefully worded or withheld information such that we have these strung out farcical conversations where they're talking about different things. And this structure of joke, I don't like intrinsically dislike, but I like it way less here than I do when it's less doing that and more doing like, let's examine how this weird New Yorker fits in with Alabama, which is all connected
to that. That is the same thing. It's all part and parcel because it's also this culture clash where you've got the quote unquote New Yorkers, which means Italians and Jews, here in the South. And so it's this culture clash where they form misperceptions of each other because Bill and Stan are making jokes about Southern stereotypes, and then there's the the garishness of when Vinny and Lisa show up of their Italian stereotypes.
That's true. Yeah, that is true for sure.
This establishing scene, it relies on something that is true of all cultures in the United States, is that you should never talk to the police. Like Homer Simpson, they choose to waive the right to remain silent.
I love that moment in The Simpsons.
No, especially Ralph Macchio, when he realizes that he's being charged for murder, he says, I shot the clerk. And he goes, that's right. And he goes, I shot the clerk. And I was like, you fucked hard. Don't say it like that. And then it comes back to haunt him at the trial, the arraignment, where the police is reading it in a completely different tonal register, where it says, like, I said that he's being charged for murder. He responds, I shot the clerk.
Right, because his word was like, I shot the clerk. And this is like an example of the where like it had to be worded in such a way that it made it even worse. But yeah,
This is actually a point that lawyers would be interested in, because it used to be when depositions or statements were taken like that, the statement would be put in there. But we learned later on that they recanted. But the whole point is that when you read a deposition or a statement at court, it doesn't include the inflection, because we heard the inflection, and the inflection was I'm incredulous. I mean, what the heck is that? I shot the clerk. I shot the clerk, but it doesn't come out with the inflection. And that's why today, when you have critical depositions and critical statements, they're recorded, either tape recorded or video recorded, and played that way. So that way the jury can hear and make the interpretation based upon the inflection, because everything depends on inflection. When the sheriff is reading from his statement, it just says, I shot the clerk. Well, that's not how he said it.
right.
The other thing is they basically confessed before he realized what the charges were, which seems unusual to me. I've never been arrested, but I have to ask, when you're arrested, do they explain to you what you were being arrested for?
I think they're supposed to, right? Tell you the charges.
This was very, very silly to me. They're like talking about what he did, and they haven't even said what it was. So I don't know if this would really happen, like a way of the cops playing coy to try to get you to say what you did. But the fact that it wasn't even, they were like wording it in a way where they weren't specific about it at all. I mean, yeah, maybe that's, again, it's just the cop trying to entrap the kid to confessing. It did feel a little silly and over the top to me.
It was. And to be honest with you, nobody, and I mean nobody in that same position would have said, I shot the clerk. It would have been, what?
Right.
What the hell? It wouldn't have been, I shot the clerk. No one's going to say that.
They'd be like, what are you talking about? I stole a can of tuna.
But it was albacore.
That's right, yeah.
Bump it up. It's a felony.
Grand Theft Albacore.
I am curious to know, what is the difference between accessory to murder and felony murder?
You committed. Felony murder means if it's committed. An accessory is the person who aided and abetted that murder.
Okay.
Remember, they kept saying, well, he didn't know I was going to do it. They go, did he stop you? No, he didn't stop me. So, they were talking about murder, and he was talking about stealing a can of tuna. So, it was, again, in the first half of the movie, you do have these, as was pointed out, these little mistaken communications where people are interpreting things differently. But an accessory is a person who didn't commit the murder, but their activities or failure to act actually aided and abetted the felony.
So I have heard of cases of people being charged with felony murder, like a guy who his friends asked him if they could borrow his car, and he said yes, and he went back to sleep. And he was charged with felony murder because they used the car to rob a gas station that went south, and someone got shot and killed.
Oh, interesting.
So that's.
Well, let me give you a recent example.
Okay.
You're in France, so maybe you don't know about this. But a couple of days ago, a guy down in Louisiana shot and killed 8 kids.
Unfortunately, I have heard of this, yes.
And they've arrested a guy who owned the gun because it was stolen from his house, and he didn't report it as he's required to under Louisiana law. They're charging him as an accessory to the murders because he didn't report it like he was legally required to. So, I mean, he didn't directly cause the murders, but by not reporting that his gun had been stolen, that led to the murders of the 8 kids. So, I mean, that's just a recent one. Now, that's a bit tenuous. They'll probably plead that out. I don't expect that to go to trial ever. But nevertheless, I mean, that's an example. He had a legal obligation and he didn't follow through on it.
What I've heard about felony murder is if someone dies while you're committing another crime, it
Okay.
gets bumped up to murder, even if it wouldn't normally be. Like if you are
Okay.
fleeing the police and you hit somebody with your car, that I've heard cases where that can be considered quote unquote felony murder.
It can be. Go back to the situation of the car that was used in a robbery and someone got killed. Someone in the car who they may not have even had a weapon, but whoever's in that car, they kill somebody. Well, they're going to be charged with felony murder as well, even though they didn't actually have anything to do with it. They were there participating in the crime that led to the murder. So yes, as always, in this case around here, we're talking about a capital crime. In other words, in Alabama, Stan and Bill are actually facing the possibility of execution.
Right. So Stan has got the accessory charge for just being there.
Pretty standard opening for a comedy, I would say.
Like I say, that this is a big risk. This is a big risk. It's marketed as a comedy, but it's actually very serious. I really can't think of another one like that dealing with courtroom procedure. It's either a stupid comedy, or it's a very serious drama like The Verdict or Kill a Mockingbird or Kramer versus Kramer or even Amistad.
Maybe we'll have to have you come back for Amistad. That's one I saw for the first time recently. Found it pretty interesting.
Is that Spielberg?
It is.
Yep,
Yeah.
it is.
That's a former president actually doing something worthwhile.
Right. It's got John Quincy Adams as practicing law.
Haven't seen that one. It's minor Spielberg, I think, by most accounts.
But it has
Anyway.
Anthony Hopkins again playing an American.
Okay.
He plays John Quincy Adams, who is post-presidency actually represents the slaves. The real name of the case is United States versus Cinque et al. Et alia. So Cinque is one of the slaves, and John Quincy Adams is the lead counsel defending the slaves on the schooner, the Amistad.
And then the current president, Martin Van Buren, is the villain, and he's the racist one. And it all felt like a practice run for Spielberg's later Lincoln movie.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, prequel to the Civil War, several decades before, but dealing with the legal questions of enslaved people.
It's 1839. So, this is not far off the Dred Scott decision that's taken place in, I think, Connecticut. That's where the trial is occurring. So it's a pretty good courtroom drama. At least I think so. Certainly not a comedy.
Right. I concur. Stay tuned, listeners. Maybe that lies in the future. But here in My Cousin Vinny, now Bill and Stan need a lawyer. And they call in My Cousin Vinny. By the way, what do you all think of the title? If there's anything I knock the movie for, maybe I shave a point off for the title, just because it doesn't tell you much.
It conveys like something like, what about Bob? It sounds like it's about like some guy who comes into your life and you can't get rid of him.
Your Uncle Buck or something.
Yeah, it's true to an extent. I guess it's true. Not the way you would expect. Like, one of the things I wanted to talk about at the end rather than now is how I can't really think of another film like this one. It kind of defies classification. What would you call it, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, my first description would be legal comedy. And yeah, I was watching it and thinking, it's like, what is the recipe? How much comedy is in this? Because it's important. I think it would be incorrect to call it not a comedy, but there's definitely more in the mix than that. Like, if there weren't these weighty matters, it wouldn't be the story that it is.
You know what I would call it? True Grits. I think that would be fun.
That would be an episode title there.
Yeah, but that reveals too much at the beginning.
That's a good title, though. I was wondering about alternatives. I like that a lot.
Well, I was thinking Brooklyn Yankee and Judge Heller's Court.
I like that, too.
I like True Grits better.
Yeah. That would look good on a poster.
I don't know, Brian. I like My Cousin Vinny. It's just always felt right to me. It's like, maybe it's just because I grew up with that being the title. I kind of feel like it's kind of playing up the connection to it, but also it's kind of got a casual feel to it. So it's like, oh, here comes my cousin Vinny. He's nothing but trouble. Will he get, make it through all of this? Has always appealed to me, but
You need to see the title in conjunction with the poster to have any idea what it's about.
That's true.
I feel like the title should convey more. I mean, some titles are pretty, like Amistad is a pretty unhelpful title if you don't know it's the name of a ship. Even then, I didn't know it was a legal drama. I knew it had to do something with slavery. That's about it.
Oh, yeah, it's a terrific film.
Okay, well, anyway, let's try to stay on target a little bit.
I will.
I'd definitely be down to talk Amistad some more in the future.
One of the things they're trying to stress in the film is how family-oriented the Gambinis are. And My Cousin Vinny, he really fits in that because, throughout the first part of the film, the connection between Bill and Vinny, and, they talk about their extended family and even Lisa's family. You get the section that these are really, tight Italian-American families. And so My Cousin Vinny, it seemed right, but not when I saw the film, not before I saw the film, but when I saw the film, then it seemed like the right title, but I wouldn't have known. As I said before, I didn't watch it because I don't like courtroom comedies. And that's what I thought it was. And to be honest with you, back in 1992, I didn't know who Marisa Tomei was. She's only 26 then. She's 61 today. But, and most recently was Aunt May to, Peter Parker. I didn't know who she was. I knew who, Joe Pesci is, but I just didn't want to see a comedy. Of course, plus at that time, Gavin was only 7 years old, and so a lot of the movies I went to see were geared towards 7-year-olds.
like Jurassic Park.
Well, you were older then.
Jurassic Park and Aladdin. Oh,
yeah. Well, Aladdin's okay, but anyhow, if you look back, My Cousin Vinny was rated R. Gavin.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Do you believe? Like, one thing that really impressed upon me the second time I saw it is like the number of F-bombs in this film that otherwise would be like PG.
There's over 30.
It's carpet bombing.
Well, they're Brooklyn, so
it makes. I guess it's just like from an artistic perspective. No objections. But if I was a marketer, I would have become pale. I was trying to find a way to market this film to get it to the biggest, broadest audience.
In 2026, they would probably get this down to a PG-13 somehow, I think.
Yeah, it would honestly probably would hurt the film.
It would be easier to show on TV without the language. But that's something that strikes me, even about, like family films of the 80s, was it seems like there was a lot more profanity in movies. Like if you watch Back to the Future or The Goonies or what was the other one? It's just like casual swearing. Oh, Ninja Turtles. The Ninja Turtles are always saying bitchin'.
What? Not F-bombs?
No, that's definitely a different tier, but I do feel like there was a period in time where there was just a lot of profanity.
But no, I'm with Brian. Like, it's jarring to watch a kid's movie from the 80s, and one of the older brother will say, "You tampon, you shit breath." It's like, dude, chill out.
So anyhow, Gavin, I couldn't have taken you to see an R-rated movie when you were 7 years old. I'd get a knock on the door from Child Protective Services.
I had two parents, Dad, so you could have nothing was stopping you from seeing My Cousin Vinny. You saw Silence of the Lambs in theaters, didn't you?
Yeah, but you guys were gone on vacation.
Okay, any excuses. Okay, well that's
it was an excuse. I know where I saw that, and I did see it by myself, and that's because I had a chance to do that.
But I was thinking as I was watching, I was like, I could show this to my kids. They really find like stories about trying to figure out what really happened interesting. And then I got to a scene with like 4 F-bombs. I was like, maybe in a couple of years.
Is there a TV edit of this? Because the TV edit, that would just add extra humor, all the different ways that they try to get around.
There is a TV edited version of it that takes out all 30 plus F-bombs. But you can still tell what they're saying. Fill in the blanks.
You have to know what the word is, You have to.
I've had it with these monkey fighting snakes on this Monday to Friday plane.
I was thinking of that too, Brian.
Oh, yeah, that doesn't work. I'm sorry.
But Vinny and Lisa roll into town to defend Bill and Stan. And early on, Vinny's got to present himself with the credentials to serve as defense counsel. basically. Appeal to the judge, say he has what it takes. And I was actually wondering, is this something that happens? And it sounds like yes. I mean, that in some states, in capital cases, it sounds like can't even have out-of-state counsel.
You can have out-of-state counsel, but they have to have co-counsel that's local counsel. Most states protect their local bar and their state bar. Alabama must have a lot of problems being able to attract sufficient number of attorneys who are willing to take on indigent defendants facing capital crimes. That's the only reason why I can think they have really a procedure that's very relaxed, but it's not as relaxed as they showed you in the film here. In the film here, even Judge Heller says it's kind of a informal process. Well, not exactly. In Alabama, in order to do this, first off, you have to come from another jurisdiction. You have to be willing to serve pro bono. In other words, you can't charge the defendant any money for representing them. They have to be indigent. They have to meet the criteria for that, and they're facing a capital crime. In other words, the possibility of being executed. But they have to complete an application to do this, and they also have to bring with them a certificate of good standing. In this case, a certificate of good standing from New York. That's within the last 60 days. And then you file those with the court. Believe it or not, the court doesn't even have to hold a hearing on this. If those things are sufficient, they can forego that, and the court does have the authority in Alabama to go ahead and grant them the ability to represent the client in this case, which is what pro hoc vice actually means. It means literally, for this turn. That's what it actually means in Latin. So they grant them the ability to represent them. So it's a much more relaxed process than you find in most other states. And I have to think the reason for that is the difficulty in finding local attorneys who are willing to represent an indigent client in a capital case. Those things are costly. Now, the courts do have to pony up some money if they have to do, like they want to have a psychological or psychiatric examination, those types of things they need to build a defense. Those things the court will have to pony up on those. And the courts aren't, generally thrilled about doing things like that. Nevertheless, it's not as informal as Judge Heller indicates that it is, but it's also not as stringent as it is in most other jurisdictions. I was surprised to find that out. I mean, I looked it up to see what the requirements are. So you could actually do it without ever having local counsel or the Alabama State Bar involved. A lot of times these things have to be filed with the state bar as well, but not in this case. And you don't even need to have a hearing. They just said, it's good enough with me. Your papers are in order.
Does Ralph Macchio rise to the legal definition of indigent?
No.
They don't have a home anymore.
Well, they're also college students. So college students are pretty much by definition indigent, aren't they?
I guess. I don't.
I mean, there is a line of dialogue that how much does an attorney cost? Oh, well, we can't afford that. So I guess that's their rationale. It does seem that the screenwriter put a lot of thought into making this plausible, like a thing that could happen.
Mm-hmm.
That I do find that very striking is that other than some of the scenes that are there for comic effect that really don't have any bearing on, I guess some of them have bearing, so I shouldn't say that, but other than a handful of scenes that are there for comic effect, this scenario is designed to be more or less plausible, and it's not like there's anything that's out. Well, there's not much that just feels like it's out of a cartoon, like just a silly thing that you just kind of laugh off. It takes the scenario pretty seriously, at least for its characters,
Mm-hmm. I mean, there's some very clever writing in this case, but it's only clever if it's also portrayed cleverly. One of the comic things you're talking about was when Vinny first shows up at the jail cell and stands awake and Bill's asleep. Again, it's that miscommunication that Brian was talking about. He thinks, there's no introduction. He thinks Vinny's just another prisoner, and he sees him give a tip to the cop who brought him down to the jail cell. First off, you never take attorneys to the jail cell. They meet in another room. So, but for the time being, it's just comedy, and everything is double entendre about prison
rape.
Yeah, prison get-togethers.
Just get straight to the point, though.
You should be down on your knees thanking me.
What's your alternative to me? Frankly.
Dan isn't a fan of this scene. I know that because he wrote about it in his letterbox review, but I was laughing out loud.
Yeah, I think it's pretty funny. And it serves, I mean, it's edgy comedy, but it also serves this idea of people go in with preconceived notions that shape how they interpret situations that they witness.
And earlier, Bill and Stan have been talking about it. He goes, you know what they do in prison, don't you? And he, so they set us up for that. Conveniently, Bill's asleep. And when Bill wakes up, or once Vinny wakes him up, everything is cleared. This is my cousin Vinny. So, but yeah, I mean, that first off, that would never happen because they don't take the attorneys down to the jail cells like that. But that was strictly for comic effect. I mean, it doesn't forward the movie in any way, shape, or form. Not like the expositions they used later, and the writers used Stan, Bill, and Lisa to fill in gaps and push things forward. Like if you were watching the arraignment and watching the preliminary hearing, it's Stan and Bill who reveal the mistakes that Vinny made. They're saying, why didn't you cross-examine? How do they know so much? But they know, and Vinny doesn't. But they knew what to do. And of course, the big one was when Lisa had read the Alabama book of criminal procedure. She says to him, he was required to give you that anyhow. So, and he didn't know that. Now, I don't know how he didn't know that, but he didn't know that.
Okay. Yeah. So we learned pretty soon that Vinny does not have these credentials to take on a case of this magnitude. He has taken the bar exam 6 times until he passed.
Mm-hmm.
Does he actually say that he passed? I was trying to determine.
Yes,
okay,
he did. He said, because they're asking him, he said, well, all right, you didn't pass it the first time, second time, right? No. Third time's a charm? No. He goes 6 times a charm. So he says that. And we find out that he's only been practicing law for 6 weeks and doing personal injury. And that's why, that's a throwaway gag when he first goes into the pool hall to collect the $200 and he sees the guy with the neck brace. And he's more interested in that guy because he said, did you fall at your house or somewhere else? So,
it's my own house.
And they have no interest because he fell at home. So that's hell. I'm not going to get any money out of that. But that was just a throwback to his statement about being a personal injury attorney. And it's a throwaway thing. It's just very quick.
Right.
I really like that scene where he's... there's this runner where, because as Brian said, they get there and they're New Yorkers and they're trying to fit in and they're not used to all this stuff and they're outsiders. And there's this runner where a guy at a pool hall won't pay Mona Lisa for winning a pool game that they bet on, $200. And first of all, just this setup is very good because it tells you a lot about Mona Lisa, that she has this confidence and that she, even though she's, very pretty and she wears kind of these elaborate fashion things, that she is kind of in there with the guys, which is, of course, key in the climax of the film. She's not someone who's a girly girl. She's got these tomboyish elements and interests and expertises that she could win a game of pool against these people at a pool hall.
Well, she's a stereotypical Brooklyn Italian girl.
Right. Yes. Yeah. But then the scene where Joe Pesci comes in and is talking to the guy about the $200, and he very matter-of-factly negotiates who's going to beat up who and how to get the $200. But he does it in a way that it is very funny and it's very well delivered. But it also conveys that when it comes time to actually go through this kind of intensive deconstruction and investigation, we know will be required in court, that he has a cool head and he actually can kind of talk through some tough stuff. And it's charming and funny. And it also I think builds out what Vinny actually is. He's a very good arguer. They talk a lot about that, and breaking down these arguments and seeing the truth of something that's really happening. And so I really like that scene.
Well said. And it's got the physical comedy that Joe Pesci is not a very big guy. And then, there's this big lunk that he's up against, but who is slow in the mental department. And I want to shout out some appreciation for the judge.
Yes, it's criminal that we haven't mentioned him yet. And so I have to establish, first of all, that the McDowell household is an Addams Family household. And I feel like the Addams Family and the Munsters is one of those two competing things that are very similar, and you're only allowed to like one of them.
It's like Coke or Pepsi.
That's right. That's right. It has to be the Addams Family.
It was actually the same 2 seasons of television that they were on.
Wow.
So yes, you missed Fred Gwynn as what was he? Herman Munster?
Herman Munster.
I can't imagine Herman Munster has much in common with Judge Haller.
Well, actually, before that, when I was a kid, there was a show called Car 54. Where are you? And he was Muldoon on that show. He was one of the two cops, and it was a comedy, and he had that same. Actually, he looks better. He would have been a good Lurch because of his size. Now he looks like a judge, and in many respects, he acts like a judge in this movie. Plus, we know his credentials because the first time, Vinny's in his office, he sees his law degree from Yale. So this is no dummy. This is no, hill jack, no justice of the peace. This is a guy who's a bona fide judge who knows how to run a court. And he's not so sure about Vinny. Now, there's a lot of things about him that indicate that, he's a pretty good judge, but there are a lot of things he did that are mistakes. Not the least of which is finding Vinny in contempt 3 times. You usually give somebody a chance. And the reason why you don't jump to contempt right off the bat is that the one thing a judge does not want to have happen to him or her is to have your case reversed or have it remanded for a new trial, or worse, have it remanded for a new trial before a different judge. And there are a lot of things he did in this case that indicate that his temperament was somewhat, let's just say, intemperate. And there were a lot of things he did that could have been those 3 quick contempts and sending him off to jail for $200 and stuff like that. The only good thing is that he never did those things in front of the jury. Every time he found him in contempt, the jury was not present. So, I mean, that saves his bacon. But if it comes up on appeal and you find out that this guy's found defendant's attorney in contempt 3 times, that seems to indicate that there might be some bias here. He also made a mistake in allowing the prosecution to provide that expert testimony without providing the opportunity for a continuance so that Vinny could get evidence to rebut it. That was a mistake and almost reversible. The last thing is, because he was very sloppy in trying to determine whether Vinny was actually competent, both Stan and Bill have a good argument here that they were denied competent counsel, which is a constitutional right. I'm serious.
Yeah, but it's saying that their own lawyer.
That could be a good loophole.
Yes, but that's a reality. That's reality.
Okay, that's not a great structure for a film. Like, first of all, the legal mistakes of the judge are not Fred Gwynn's fault. I think he plays the judge masterfully.
He does. He plays it great. He has some great lines. Then he also made a couple of comments, but fortunately, I don't think they ever rose. The quick contempt citations were a concern to me. But he made some other remarks. My favorite one is when Vinny asked if he could treat Lisa as a hostile witness, which means he can ask her leading questions. And he wanted to know what the relationship was. And she says she's his fiance. And he goes, well, that explains the hostility. That's a comment that's intemperate, but it's not to the level of bias. It probably made the jurors smile as well. But, judges have to be careful about what they do and what they say and the record they put in there, because no judge wants to get reversed. So, and there's enough elements here you could.
The contempt charges, though, are among the funniest parts of the film, I think, both for the reason for it, as Vinny's inability to get through a simple arraignment, and then afterwards his reactions, like not realizing that the first, like, the remarks about his outfit were very serious. Mm-hmm. And then the third one is what he says when he's held in contempt. He goes, well, that's a fucking surprise. I think that maybe that contempt was merited. So.
There's a lot building into these interactions between Vinny and the judge, and I was really admiring it this time through, because you have all of the stuff that goes wrong with his outfit, and it's like just a comedy of errors. But it's also this fish out of water, not speaking the same way. So like Vinny's thinking when the judge is hassling him about his outfit, that's just a way that you like give someone a hard time and then you move on. That's kind of like the stereotypical way of an Italian Brooklyn American,
Mhm.
Brooklyn Italian American. And then he comes back. He's like, well, how come you're wearing the same outfit? He's like, oh, you were serious about that?
Yeah.
But then it gets piled on. Vinny getting like less and less patient because he's getting bad sleep. Because this is another runner, is that their sleep keeps getting interrupted. And there's like 5 times in this movie that every time I watch it, I'm like, I just witnessed the funniest scene in the history of cinema. And one of them is when they've just completely lost like everything that they've done to try to get some sleep has gone bad. They're like, we're just going to rent a cabin and go out to the woods. Finally, we'll get some sleep. And then this owl starts hooting loudly, and he grabs a gun and runs out of the house and just starts shooting wildly. And that scene, and we kind of get like this cleverly designed rack focus where you like see the owl, and then without cutting, it shows Vinny shooting the gun, and then it zooms back to the owl. It focuses back on the owl. It's so funny.
And then right when it focuses back on the owl hoots again. Which, how did they make the owl do that? That's an incredible shot. I'm glad that you called it out, because to pull the focus the right way and have the owl act on time, masterful.
Mm-hmm.
I thought it was a great scene. And I was wondering the same thing here. This is an absolutely beautiful shot. Incidentally, it's a screech owl, if you want to know.
I deduced that from the screeching.
Yeah.
That's a horrible sound. That's a horrible sound. I don't want to hear that sound ever. The payoff, though, is that when he actually does his cross-examine, like he gets to his first successful cross-examination, and he's telling contempt, and he tells Lisa, don't bail me out this time. And there's like a prison riot, and he's sleeping through it because he finally had a good day.
That's because it was so noisy, it probably reminded him of home. I'm serious. You get the idea from Bill earlier on when he was telling Stan that, his parents might argue, but they're amateurs. The Gambinis really like to argue. And so, again, it's the stereotype, the Italian-American family, arguing and yelling at each other, which you see in a lot of shows. That noise probably made him feel like he was at home.
Yeah.
But anyhow, he got a good night's rest.
So early on, Vinny is botching these situations, botches the arraignment. He's racking up these contempt charges. And to even get in the courtroom at all, he's feigned this identity that he's got more experience than he really does. But the trial looms. We're finally getting to the trial. And in the lead up, Vinny gets to know the prosecuting attorney, who's this guy named Jim Trotter. I know I've seen this actor elsewhere. But one thing I like about this film is that there's not really villains. There's antagonism. There's the two sides of the trial at work, but everybody is well-meaning and everybody is seeking justice as they see it.
There's a subtle thing about the prosecutor. His name isn't Jim Trotter. It's Jim Trotter the Third. And the reason for that, this is very common. You'll find it down south, is that there is still a class that consider themselves to be patrician, and Jim Trotter fits in that. And while you try to look like the common man by going by nicknames, which is very common in the South, not James, but Jim, not Robert, but Bob, sometimes William Robert, which is Billy Bob, goes on and on. That's real. There are a lot of people down there, especially politicians who, to affect an air of informality, will call themselves Bill or Bob or something like that, not by their actual given names. But when it comes to indicating you're a member of the patrician class, you're going to be the third or the fourth. The Roman numerals are going to be there. And that's just a very subtle thing they put in there. Incidentally, the prosecutor is a pretty decent guy. And he fesses up right off the bat that he wishes he had the murder weapon. They don't have the murder weapon. And he knows that affects his case. But, he was willing to give Vinny access to his files, even though Vinny didn't know he had a right to it. And he first asked him if he had a Xerox machine over there at the hotel. But then, he goes ahead and at the state's own expense makes a copy of everything for him. So, and the judge was actually pretty nice about giving Vinny a copy of the criminal procedure book for Alabama. That was the one he gave him when he was going through his first interview for Pro Hoc Vice. So, I mean, they were actually kind of helping him. But you're right. There are no villains in this case, and the prosecution is definitely not a villain. he's actually a pretty decent guy.
And not even the sheriff is a villain, as he does a decent thing at the end. Something I don't think a real sheriff would actually do.
No, a real sheriff would have stuck with what he said to him at the beginning. Go do it
It's not
yourself.
my job.
Yeah.
It's not my job.
But I want to talk about discovery. So there's this bit where Vinny is becoming buddy-buddy, sort of, with the prosecuting attorney, realizing, hey, this guy is not that bad. Just doing his job. And this is sort of a play on Vinny's part of, oh, well, if I become friends with this guy, maybe I'll know what he knows.
Bonding.
Like, rubbing his hands together, conniving. And it's like, I watched this in high school, fresh off the one semester of street law. It's like, you mean discovery? And then it's like 11 minutes before he's like, haha, I got access to his files. And Mona Lisa says, you mean discovery? It's like, how did he not learn that in law school?
Well, that's the joke in between is he has to go on this hunting trip that he's not excited about.
Right. And you get one of the best line deliveries of the movie with Marisa Tomei.
Right, so it's not the hunting trip itself, which we're spared from seeing, but Marisa Tomei giving him hell for even thinking about doing it. I was just talking
Imagine
about,
you're a baby deer.
Yeah, because he's hunting deer.
Your little doe lips. So, in reality, she would have said, imagine Bambi. But, because of, property rights, I guess you couldn't say that.
Although Disney, having bought 20th Century Fox, I watched this on Disney Plus.
Oh, okay. Well, I guess they can't say Bambi now.
I'm pretty sure Bambi is now in the public domain.
Yeah.
Because there are other adaptations of the novel, and there's been a horror knockoff. I won't get into that, but I think it's pretty funny, though. I will not be attempting a Brooklyn accent at any point during this podcast.
Well, I got a few more coming up.
But Lisa, now at this point, drives home to Vinny, like, you can't be a fuck up, dude. This is a serious matter. Like, it has gravity, and if you do this wrong, your cousin's gonna die.
So there is a specific scene where Joe Pesci is looking sad, and Marisa Tomei comes by and says, "What's wrong?" And he says, "I feel bad. I feel like I got to take this seriously. Like, there's some gravity to this." And he's saying this. And this, to me, is the inflection point from when the movie goes from, like, good to just great, because it's really digging into, like, it's taking exactly what Kevin was saying earlier, like, this very serious thing and trying to, like, interlock it with the comedy. And for whatever reason, like, that's the moment for me where it kind of locks into place that it has found that balance between continuing to be very funny, but now you're, like, fully invested in this as, like, a courtroom drama. Is this guy going to get off the hook? And, like, yeah, we're joking around and, oh, he slips in the mud and falls down, but, like, this is like a kid's life on the line. And Ralph Macchio seems like a real person, and someone that, I mean, Ralph Macchio is a real person. The character he's playing seems like a real person, someone who, I don't know, seems like bright and kind and stuff. And you're like, yeah, we know this person is innocent because we see them from the start. I thought that was an interesting choice, but, like, definitely the right choice is to, like, make it unambiguous that he was innocent. There's not like a twist, oh, he actually did it, or the friend actually did it, type of thing, like, even lingering, You're right, Brian. And I think that's, and then there's a couple more of exchanges to that effect. I think that's a key moment for the film.
Yeah. And so she basically says, the judge gave you this book about how the trials work, and you should actually read it. You should really take this to heart because this is an important matter. And then Vinny locks in. And so the next thing is like a montage of he's going and he's questioning the witnesses that he failed to cross-examine at the arraignment, and he's getting more information. He's reading the stuff from the prosecutor so that when the trial actually kicks off, he's ready.
There's, again, an interesting thing. The arraignment, we know what a screw-up he was at the arraignment. Stan and Bill point that out to him. But at the preliminary hearing where they're trying to decide whether there's sufficient evidence to go forth on this case, the preliminary hearing where he didn't ask any questions, he didn't cross-examine, there are a lot of things that are very interesting in that preliminary hearing that, no one ever actually talks about them. One is all three of the witnesses, the main witnesses, identify, Stan and Bill, and they identify the car as a mint green 1964 Buick Skylark. And of course, there's no cross-examination there with a white cover. However, Stan and Bill never had that cover up. It was never up. And how did they know it was white?
I'm not worried about the flatulence because of that. It's one of the first time I laughed in the movie.
That's right. They did joke about that. But the whole thing is that thing was never up. And then when the prosecutor shows them a picture and say, can you identify this, as the, mint green 1964 Buick Skylark that you saw? The picture's black and white.
I did notice that. I did not notice the cover. That's very interesting.
Yeah, it shows the cover up. And apparently the cover must have been up on the Pontiac Tempest that was the actual getaway car. But it wasn't up for them. It never was up. And then they put it up and then they show them a black and white photo. How in the heck can you tell the car's mint green from a black and white photo? So, there was lots of mistakes right there. And this is where Vinny is still a fuck up. I'm sorry.
This seems like something you could call out pretty easily.
They are the things he could have done. If he were an attorney practiced in criminal law, he would have asked for a separation of witnesses, because the witnesses were just feeding off each other. Yep, that's them. Yep, that's the car. Because they were all present and heard each other giving their testimony. You want a separation of witnesses so that doesn't happen. But he didn't know to do any of that stuff. So it's from here he starts to gain insight with the help from Mona Lisa Vito herself. So that's a great name.
Is that before or after he gives his opening statement? It's one of the best lines in the film.
Everything he said is bullshit. Yeah, it is.
Thank you. No. Everything that guy said is bullshit. Thank you. And the judge strikes everything except thank you for the record.
Now, see, that actually is something that could happen. But if you're an attorney and you say
Really?
something like that, yes, oh, sure, it's happened.
Contempt, maybe?
It could be. But again, judges don't usually find you in contempt until they've given you several warnings. At least one. And in a lot of cases, he wasn't. In this case, he said, we don't use that type of language in this courtroom. A judge will absolutely say that. Even though he said it in front of the jury, the judge will say it. That's not reversible error, because you don't use that kind of language in court if you're the attorney. Other people's stuff will slip out of their mouths and they'll say stuff like that. And a judge might mildly admonish someone that, to see if you can't use a little bit better language. But it was funny. But again, it doesn't really matter. It's telling the jury to disregard his comment. They're not going to disregard it. They heard it. And they're going to know, okay, he thinks it's all bullshit. We'll find out. But that does lead to one other thing that we haven't talked about. And this is the part of the movie that I absolutely do not like. And that's the public defender, John Gibbons. John Gibbons comes in as a public defender. He's kind of a Mr. Rogers type of character. He even looks like Mr. Rogers, but we don't know that he's going to have, anxiety attacks when he tries to address the jury. Now, judges know public defenders like they know prosecutors. They would have known this guy had that type of inability to actually present in court. And I really did not like the way they presented him with these anxiety attacks in there. But that public defender does, if I were teaching a class using Vinny as an instructional tool, this would be a good case of the maxim that you hear lawyers say: never ask a question that you cannot reasonably anticipate what the answer will be. He asked 3 questions in a row when he did not know what the answer would be, and they just submarined everything. One, he says, you were 50 feet away. Do you think 50 feet away is, sufficient distance in order to be able to identify the perpetrators? And he says, yeah, of course I do. You don't ask a question like that. It's conclusory. And he asked him about the prescription glasses. So you weren't wearing your prescription glasses. He goes, "The reading glasses." And then he asked him, what's the color of their eyes? And he tells him what the color of their eyes are, which I kind of doubt you could have told from 50 feet away. But nevertheless, he asked 3 questions for which he could not reasonably anticipate what the answer is. Then he goes back and tells Stan, "Ooh, tough character. That's a tough witness." No, he wasn't.
I'm completely with you on, this character does not stand up to scrutiny. I also laugh really hard at his deliveries. He's got some really good ones. The one where he like kind of goes into a stutter attack when he's talking to the jury, and he's like putting his arm on one of the jury guys trying to get a sentence out, and like spittles coming out as it made me laugh.
I don't think we had heard him speak before, like maybe once.
Yeah,
when
that's
they
the
first
thing is he
meet him,
talks to Stan early on and he speaks normally.
but not at length.
He must have performance anxiety in the public
Yeah.
eye, which how did he get in this situation to begin with?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it serves this terrific dramatic point in the film, which I'm glad that it did, is like, why would you, given how bad Vinny is at the start, why would you do that? And like, wouldn't you want something else? And so it's like this kind of another turning point in the story where he's like, okay, I realize I've messed up so far. Don't go with the public defender. And there's like a couple of good exchanges between Pesci and Ralph Macchio who can both act. And it's like, yeah, like the stakes are high and like you have to make tough choices here. And then it's like, well, maybe the public defender does make sense. And then that performance comes out. And then that's like right when Vinny flips on the switch to actually start being effective.
Right,
And,
because he steps in and he cross-examines the witnesses and is able to pick apart their eyewitness accounts. And two of them, he argues that their vision was compromised. You know, the lady with the thick glasses and the guy with the dirty window. And then even the guy who's so eagle-eyed and can see across the courtroom, he has his timetable wrong.
mhm.
Before you get too far into this, I want to talk about the public defenders. I have mixed feelings about this because I feel like making fun of the public defenders punching down. Like the public defenders have a really thankless job.
Oh, completely. Yeah.
And also, making fun of speaking disabilities. And I feel like speaking disabilities are, when they go to hell for saying this, but they're great fodder for comedy. I was talking to my dad earlier about, Pontius Pilate and Life of Brian. And Michael Palin has not one but two famous roles where his character has a huge speaking impediment. And of course, there's The Priest and The Princess Bride. I have just like this inner feeling that it's okay. Like, I think it's funny, but why is it funny? Why is it okay? I guess in the case of Pontius Pilate, it is punching up. He's the governor. It's like, I think it is that this is a person who's supposed to be able to speak well, and he can't. That's the joke. It's also the joke here.
It is and it isn't, though. In The Princess Bride and in Life of Brian, you're talking about pure comedies. This is not a pure comedy. These guys' lives on the line. That's one of the reasons why I found it objectionable. Also, if he were a public defender, the first thing I would have done as a public defender is try to get a separation of trial so that my client is not going to be dragged down with Bill, who's staying with Vinny, because at that point things look pretty dire.
Mhm.
So, and I thought the public defender actually would have helped Vinny a little bit because I'm going to presume that he has some criminal trial experience. But then, why the judge? The judge would have known this guy. So would the prosecutor. And that's why I find it hard to believe that this guy would punish himself by going into a jury, which is pretty taxing on a person. A jury trial really is very taxing. And the guy has anxiety attacks. His opening statement was terrible, and then he cross-examined the witness. It was bad enough that he was spitting all the time. You almost felt like he needed a spit guard around the witness and the jury. On the other hand, then he asked three stupid questions in a row. So I mean, this guy's not a particularly good public defender.
On the upside, the scene ends with Stan going, "I want that guy." So that feels like a moment of triumph there. And it's only the one scene where they bring in the public defender to kick him. It's like, well, again, when you think about Palin, Palin playing Pontius Pilate is different from Palin, A Fish Called Wanda, where the joke is that he has a speaking impediment, and that's still pretty funny, but not as funny as a governor or a priest not being able to enunciate. Part of me feels it's an ugly scene, but it's weird because I go back and forth on it, like from a moment to moment basis. But now you can proceed to talk about the bushes.
Oh yeah, 3 all-timer scenes. Genuinely, 3 of my favorite movie scenes are these first 3 witness questionings, and you can even just I know them by name. If you Google Magic Grits, and 7 bushes and prescription glasses. My Cousin Vinny. You'll get the 3 clips, and they're all very good.
See, and this is where the lawyers, from what I understand, most of the lawyers really like this last part of the trial, because actually what he does, even up to the point where he asks the court permission to treat his fiancée as a hostile witness so he can ask her leading questions. Those things are all plausible. Not that your fiancée is ever going to be on the witness stand and be as uncooperative as she was, but she's mad at him. She's pissed at him.
Literally carried to the witness stand.
But these first 3 scenes, it's great because now you're seeing Vinny in action, and the Grits one, he's like putting on this theatrical flair that I was wondering if it was going to get more of an objection than it did.
I mean, he's making fun of these witnesses.
Are you saying these are magic beans? Or magic grits? Did you get them from this same seller that sold Jack his magic beans? And it's terrific. And then also one thing that I love is when he says he's done, like with the witness, he never says it in a standard way. I think 2 of the times he says, "I got no more use for this guy," which is just a great way to say I'm done questioning the witness.
I will tell you that judges will allow a certain amount of histrionics, but not a lot. They will not allow you to engage in histrionics that abuses the witness.
Yeah, he goes a little too far in that direction. This film is not admiring of Southern culture. I think it's like universally hostile to Southerners.
Actually, that was a bit disturbing to me because they set up what a bunch of hayseeds people from Alabama are as they're driving in. You see free dirt. You see manure for sale. You see a place that's selling a bunch of hubcaps. Gavin, that could have been driving down an Indiana back road.
Well, I mean, I don't have anything positive to say about Indiana, to be honest. I was like, I don't know, maybe the black lady is okay, but the other 2, like the Grits guy, well, especially Bush's guy, he's making fun of him.
Well, he's allowing him to make fun of himself. Well, that's okay.
And all 3 of them, crucially say, "Oh, it's like they were actually like they're presented with a narrative, and they bought into that narrative, and they framed their memory from that narrative. And then when it was presented to them that there were holes in this narrative, they said, actually, you're right. This kind of doesn't make sense." And they were all honest, and they all adjusted their perspective as soon as they were presented with this persuasive evidence that they were wrong. They weren't stubborn about it or mean about it. They're like, I guess you're right. I could be wrong. So I appreciated that.
That is true.
I will tell you one thing, though, that we don't see this happen, and it would be a mistake on Vinny's part. But you remember how he's going through with Magic Grits guy and with Trees and Bushes guy. Oh, no, that's the same guy as Magic Grits. But those 2 guys right there. Remember how he's taking the pictures and he's putting them down in front of the witness? You don't give a damn what the witness says. You want the jury to see those pictures. So what you do is that you want those pictures to be handed around so the jurors are seeing the same thing that you're seeing that you're talking to him about. He relies entirely upon the testimony of the witness himself without letting the jury see the pictures. The jury needs to see those pictures, and when they see that, they go, "Oh, yeah, there's no way he could have seen that."
Right. And what are these bushy-looking things?
Yeah. There's 7. So this guy couldn't count above 5 because he couldn't see his other 2 fingers. Anyhow.
Just shout it out when you know the answer.
So, yes, I mean, judges don't want to see witnesses abused. Vinny got close a couple of times, and his histrionics were a little bit, they weren't quite over the top. But judges will admonish attorneys and tell them, change the tone. Even if they have to do it, they usually don't want to do that in front of the juries. Sometimes they'll have them come up to the bench like they did when there was a challenge to the prosecution's surprise witness. Anyhow, he wasn't quite over the top. At least I felt he wasn't. But the big thing is you need to show those pictures to the jury because they're the ones who determine the facts. The judge determines the law. The jury determines the fact. In fact, Jim Trotter III even told him that in his opening statement.
Verdict means truth.
Well, it says it's not what I think. It's what you think based upon the facts as they're presented to you. And that was actually everything he said was accurate.
So Vinny is riding high after this first day of trial. He's succeeded in discrediting the eyewitness accounts, but the prosecution strikes back by calling in an expert witness. And Kevin, it sounded like you had thoughts about this.
Yeah, Mona Lisa, I just love to call her by her full name, Lisa. Earlier on, after she had read, the Alabama code on criminal procedure, it told him no surprises. He has to give you a witness list, no surprises, and she's right. That doesn't mean that couldn't happen, that because of the way a trial goes, it looks like you're going to need an expert witness. And in this case, yeah, possible, but you can't do it the way they showed it in the film. That's not even remotely possible, not anywhere, because there's no surprises. What the prosecution has to do is amend their witness list. Actually, they don't even have to be good. Would ask the court for a continuance in order to, first off, read the expert's report. First off, they challenge it because, let's face it, there is no way on God's green earth that guy conducted the examination and wrote his report in half a day, because that's what it would have taken. And if he did, it's not worth a damn. So, this guy could be qualified, and I'm going to assume he is, but we don't see that. We don't see him qualifying him as an expert. In fact, he starts taking testimony from him, and at that point, that's when Vinny starts to challenge him. And then Vinny, quoting from the book of criminal procedure, indicates that this is a surprise, that we haven't been provided a sufficient amount of time to be able to read the reports, to digest the reports because they are technical, and to be able to obtain a witness on our own to basically refute that. And the judge listens to him, and the judge denies his request for a continuance. That, in this case, given that it's a capital crime that these guys are facing, is reversible error. It just definitely is.
But it's a great line.
It may be a great line. The judge says, that's really well thought out, almost to the point. I didn't expect anything intelligent to ever come out of your stupid mouth, which is what he's saying. But no, I'm going to deny it. That actually is reversible error. This is not some civil trial. This is a capital crime trial. And not granting that continuance is, of course, that sets up the dramatic finish. So I know this is important for the film. But the reality is the judge, if he would have allowed it, and most judges, I can't say all of them because judges are, they run the gamut of skill and ability like anybody else. Most judges in a matter like this would have refused to allow the prosecutor to present an expert witness under these circumstances because it doesn't meet any of the criteria to allow for it. There's no surprise here. There had to be something that came up that surprised them, and now we have to find a way to address it. And there's no surprise here. They could have done this a long time ago. The fact is they didn't do it. So this is the one area where the prosecutor screwed up. And before most judges would say, what's the surprise here? What are the extenuating circumstances that would allow for expert witness to be able to testify? It's just not there. So, but it's like I say, it lends itself then, to the dramatic finish, which incidentally, all right, what's an expert witness? Most times someone is an expert witness by academic background and training. Not both, but one or the other or both. There are a lot of former law enforcement officials who testify as experts in accident reconstruction because that's what they did when they were in law enforcement. So they have the training and the expertise that they've gotten. Some have the academic background. In this case, we have an FBI agent who has the academic credentials and the work knowledge to be able to testify to what he testified to. So, but the whole point is that expert witness should never have been allowed to testify. And if he did allow him, the defense should have had a continuance. That's the one thing out of this whole trial, which also is, everything happens between January 4th and February 2nd. Do you realize how fast that is for a capital crime? It never happens that fast. That looks like a stacked job. It looks like, well, it doesn't look like a fair trial.
I never thought about that. That's a really good point. Because it would take like a year, right?
Oh, it could take longer. But then again, when Stan, and Bill inside the prison where they might actually, never mind.
It makes you think twice about committing murder, when you hear that.
All the red tape you got to go through, man.
I know.
Yeah, nothing's that easy. But yeah, I mean, as far as that goes, the FBI guy probably was, and what he testified to is within the scope of his knowledge, but an expert witness has to be someone who can inform the court and jury about matters that are beyond the normal experiences of the judge and the jury.
Right.
And what he was testifying, what he proposed to testify about, it probably is. The whole thing is that should have been done a long time ago. You can't just claim surprise now and then, call up opposing counsel the night before and say, got a surprise for you.
Yeah, you're so screwed.
What Lisa said was true. No surprises.
And what this expert witness says is that the tire track evidence left behind by the fleeing vehicle matches the tires on the defendant's car.
And that's true. All that was true and no one disputed that. But what it came out then in cross-examination is that those types of tires are on, most of the cars in the United States of America. And it's only the further expert testimony by, Lisa, and then corroborated by the FBI guy, is that it couldn't have been done by a Buick Skylark. And see, she was qualified as an expert based upon, not upon her academics, but upon her experiences, her actual functional knowledge of automobiles, which obviously Vinny also has because Vinny wrote that note to the sheriff before she ever testified. Go look for a 1963 Pontiac Tempest.
Yes. So I noticed that this watch, I had not noticed that before. So Vinny sees the picture. Mona Lisa has been taking Polaroid pictures throughout the film, and he's looking through them. She is miffed at this point because he's not allowing her to take a more active role helping him with his case.
He's mean to her.
He notices a detail in the photos, looking specifically at the tire tracks, and he says, wait, we got to get her back in here. We got to get her to testify. And he sends the sheriff off. So he has this encyclopedic knowledge of cars, too.
That's right.
I thought it was her. The first two times I watched it, I thought it was just Mona Lisa's wheelhouse. No, he, just looking at this photo, was able to put all this together, but he needs her to say it because he can't just say it as the lawyer.
They set this up at the beginning of the movie when they first drive into town.
Yeah, complaining about the mud in the tire track, so that's not a thing.
And that guy comes up and says, everybody in Alabama, you got to look out for our mud. But she indicates her knowledge, right then, a little bit of knowledge. Later on, we find out that her dad, and before she ever testifies, that Vinny was actually working as a mechanic for her father. So for at least 10 years. They both have this encyclopedic knowledge of automobiles, and he can't testify though because he's the attorney. He needs her to testify, and she's pissed at him.
But would she have been accepted by the court as an expert witness?
You would have to provide a great deal more information. And, when the prosecutor asked for permission, he used the term voir dire, which is what we usually use with a jury. He asked for the ability to voir dire this witness to determine whether she's an expert. And he asked that question, and, he tries to make it look like, she doesn't know the answer, but she says, no, it's because it's a trick question. You can't answer that question because blah, 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 which is starting to show, that she has quite a bit of knowledge about automobiles. And then the prosecutor drops it and says she has no challenge to her as an expert witness. He lets her go ahead and testify, which is okay. You wouldn't expect her to be an expert witness, but you can be qualified as an expert witness based upon your knowledge and your training. This is not an academic area. This is knowledge and training, and she has it because her whole family have been mechanics going back, and she is too. And she didn't just change oil. She did everything.
She was an out-of-work hairdresser. It makes you wonder, why did she just stay as a mechanic? It seems like a much more lucrative profession. much more useful skill than
Yeah.
I don't know.
But I'm with Brian on this from like a narrative perspective, that the fact that I feel like if you're a writer, I almost like got the sense that he tried to crack it, whoever wrote this, to like get it so that Mona Lisa solved it. But you can't, the way that all of the little pieces need to happen at the end, particularly the very funny bit where she's a reluctant witness, you can't really have it so that she's already on the witness stand unless we know that she needs to be on the witness stand. So you kind of need Vinny to figure it out on his own. And this has never been completely satisfying for me. Now it's more than made up for it by how good Marisa Tomei is when she's on it. And that whole exchange is just incredible, just remarkable. But that, and then another one that bugged me this time around is when they're like questioning whether she could be an expert, the prosecuting attorney has like a gotcha question in his back pocket. He just thinks of it. So he's a car expert too. He can come up with this question just like that to try and trick her and prove that she's an expert. Because I don't think I see him like going back and forth with the FBI guy to like, how do I prove that she's a witness? He just like comes up with it too. I'm willing to power through it because it gets to the really good exchange at the end, but that has always been a little unsatisfying to me. It would have been better if Mona Lisa had cracked it first, but I just don't know how you could have written this such that all of the entertaining pieces where she doesn't want to go on the stand, then she gets forced to go on there, and then she's reluctant, but then finally she sees it and says, the defense is wrong, or something like that, to get it to work where she's the one who cracks it. So
I think what it is for me is, like, I assumed that Vinny picked up on the positraction, but not that he would have known the exact make and model of the car that they are looking for.
yeah, because he has that too. That's true.
He had to know that because he wrote the message and gave it to the sheriff before she testified.
Exactly. That's what I realized this time.
So he did know it. The other thing, too, that's kind of interesting here is that we learn, near the end of it, we know which way Stan and Bill are heading. They're heading west. But the two actual killers headed east. They went because they were captured in Georgia.
In Atlanta, I believe.
Wow, that feels pretty, like, how did that one slip through? Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I wonder about that because the tire tracks would have shown them going east, yet they were captured going west. So, incidentally, the film was filmed in Georgia. I didn't know if you knew that.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that.
Yeah, and that first motel they stayed at, the General Putnam, is a real motel in Georgia. It's closed now, but it was a real motel back in 1991 when they filmed this. So, yes, I would have had an interest in seeing it because I knew it was filmed in Georgia, and I lived in Georgia for a couple of years, but not really in the area where they filmed it. Nevertheless, the tire tracks should have shown them going east because that's what they did. They headed east, the exact opposite direction from what Bill and Stan were doing.
I have further thoughts about both of them being experts. As again, I had memories of Marisa Tomei as being the primary expert. When I watched this film, there's kind of an uncomfortable scene where they're engaging in foreplay about talking about a faucet.
Yeah.
Which shows their kind of mechanical know-how, and I realize that it requires them both to know what they're talking about for that scene to work, although Marisa seems to be
That's a setup.
primary expert. Yes.
I really like that
There's a lot of setup in this film for pretty much everything that happens, which I think it's pretty good. It doesn't overdo it. It does like some films would show flashbacks. The things we had already seen, it would ruin the mood, but not here.
Like I said, I thought there was very clever writing in this film on how they were able to, prepare us for what was coming up. I thought it was a very, very clever script.
I love the script in this film. Like, as great as the performances are, and they are great. I mean, there's two exchanges between Tomei and Pesci in this that like raise the hairs on the back of my neck, like when Willem Dafoe rants in The Lighthouse, where it's just like, oh my God, this is electric. And one is the faucet foreplay, and one is when, I guess the positraction too at the end, but the bit where they're outside on the porch of one of the places that they're sleeping in this succession of residencies.
It's Trotter's cabin, isn't it?
I think so. Where she's stamping on the porch and she's talking about all the pressures, and one of them is her biological clock. My biological clock stamp, stamp, ticking. And then he fires back at her and he does the same thing. He's like, is there any more shit we could pile on, possibly, in this moment? And he's got the Joe Pesci voice and just, it very, very good. Excellent acting.
That scene, she's wearing the most incredible bodysuit, and when she turns around and you see that's backless, like I gasped. My memory of this film is that she wears a lot of leather. When I saw it on VHS, and that's a false memory, as leather doesn't really do it for me, but the thing wearing in this film, especially that, I know we're not supposed to go too horny on Maine here, but come on.
Gavin coming in with the hot take that 26-year-old Marisa Tomei is attractive.
No, I mean, no. I didn't think about it when I was in college. I thought about it this time. I understand why George Costanza was interested in her.
I'm glad somebody brought in George Costanza. Yeah, there's like a, maybe it's just one episode, but I felt like it was a couple episodes where he's got a relationship with Marisa Tomei, and everybody's marveling at that.
It's several episodes. But he's like, he falls in love with, like, he meets her by chance, and then he's watching My Cousin Vinny. And then his fiance dies because he wanted to get the cheap stamps for the wedding invitations, and they have some kind of toxin. So she falls over and dies. And then when George Costanza receives the news, the first thing he does is call Marisa Tomei. He says, "Hey Marisa, I'm single again. My fiance just died. Do you want to have dinner tonight?" "Oh, you don't? Well, okay. How about to? Oh, okay." He hangs up. That's the banality of evil right there. Is George Costanza? He's like the worst human being.
And of course, he's the stand-in for series creator Larry David. So,
are you serious? That's Larry David? Oh my god!
I mean, he's not played by Larry David, but
yeah, no. But I mean, like,
Seinfeld is the story of the creation of Seinfeld by Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, who is his avatar in the series is George Costanza.
I did not realize that Costanza was supposed to be Larry David himself. That does not raise my estimation of him. He's not only is he the worst sitcom character ever, but his parents, I think, are the worst sitcom parents like ever put to film.
I don't know.
The Costanza family is.
I was just thinking Newman was a pretty awful character too.
He's not nearly as bad as the Costanzas, but that's, we're getting, so I apologize for causing this tangent.
All right, we'll come back. We'll be buzzed on Seinfeld. We're generating, this is like a kitchen, an innovation, blue sky brainstorm. But yes, it wraps up that the breakthrough is the pause attraction. The car that the murderers got away in could not be the car that Bill and Stan were driving, because the physical evidence of the tire tracks does not match what their car would do, having driven over this median. And so I liked that Vinny brings back the witnesses that had been brought up to question them again. The expert witness from the prosecution, and Vinny basically asks him, is what Marisa Tomei said accurate? And does it invalidate what you said? And the guy basically says, yes. This is something I hadn't thought about.
Well, he wouldn't have either. I mean, he was all the evidence was that they were looking at a 1964 mint green Buick Skylark. No one asked him about the effect of going over that median. But from their testimony, it not have been the Skylark. It had to be a 1963 Pontiac Tempest. So yeah, I mean, it was a nice wrap up for the film itself.
One thing that distracted me the first time I saw the film, and it did it again here, is that in that opening scene, twice we see a truck that's carrying wood that they drive around, and then we see it again when they drive away. It makes it seem like it's going to tie in somehow. I was like, we basically have a murder mystery. We know they're innocent, but we don't know who's guilty. And I kept thinking, well, what about that wood truck? But that doesn't make any sense because it looks nothing like a mint green car. It's like, what? That's a really distracting detail for me.
It was just a detail to indicate, first off, in that part of Alabama, also in Georgia as well, Weyerhaeuser owns an incredible amount of property in that area, and that what they raise, pine trees. And so they're constantly harvesting pine trees. And you see a lot of trucks like that in Alabama and Georgia. So it was just another thing to indicate what a bunch of hayseeds were there, but they didn't need to show it the second time. The first time you got the idea, they're going along carrying a bunch of pine logs, and they go around it. Incidentally, they break the law then too.
Yes, it's a double line. Yeah, so I noticed that the first time, and it makes it seem like a lot of the times this movie is like a Chekhov's gun. The movie, it's like they show you something that pays off later, and that detail never pays off.
No, it was just another gimme to indicate what a bunch of hillbillies they were.
That's not what I thought when I saw. I don't think anything when I see lumber seems to be a pretty desirable commodity wherever you live. So I did not think of that as, oh, those people down south, they need wood.
No, it's a type of wood. These are all pine. Of course, you wouldn't have noticed that.
I didn't realize it was hillbilly lumber. So
yeah, it is hillbilly lumber because it grows fast. But every time I see a truck like that full of lumber, I think of a Stephen King novel, because they figure into lots of them, including So I mean, that's what I was thinking of the first time I saw it. I go, that's like in the Stephen King story.
I was thinking of Final Destination 2 when there's a horrible accident on the highway and lumber comes flying out and goes through the window.
Mm-hmm.
So Twin Peaks also, the opening sequence prominently features a log truck. I did a shot-for-shot recreation of it when I visited Twin Peaks for my TV show Gauntlet, and I couldn't find a log truck. It's like the one time that I wanted to find a log truck, I wasn't finding any. I went to the actual waterfall, but I didn't find a log truck.
Is it the city that plays Twin Peaks, or is there a real Twin Peaks?
It is the city that plays Twin Peaks. And there really is a mountain that's got the 2 points on it. So it's like, for intents and purposes, it's basically, it is a place, but it's not called Twin Peaks. It's called Snoqualmie, Washington.
Well, I see why they changed it for the show.
And I don't think that stuff really happens there, but maybe. I didn't watch
much
of the show.
You never know. You know that's Twilight territory up in that corner of the U.S.
Exactly. But in the end, Fred Gwynne has to shake Vinny's hand, essentially. It's like, you done good.
That's an interesting at the end. First off, I don't know if you guys knew this, but that was Fred Gwynne's last role. Mm-hmm. He died in 1993. He died a year later.
Oh my God! How old was he?
Well, yeah, I wasn't expecting him to die that old, but yeah, he died a year. That was his last role. He didn't. He died in 93. So, but the one thing at the end is the question about whether somehow Lisa got Vinny's mentor, Judge Malloy, to put his entire career in jeopardy, to send a fax to Judge Hepper, indicating that Callow, really is an attorney in good standing. I told Gavin, I said, I don't think that's what the ending actually was, was meant to be. I think there was a different ending, and it wasn't supposed to end that way. I thought the movie would end with, the judge receiving the fax from New York indicating that Callow is a fraud, and that Vinny was never qualified to do this at the beginning, but the trial's over. So, exposing him right now is not going to do any good. And I would have had him just look at it, see that, and then crumple up the paper. That's what I would have done. I wouldn't have put Judge Malloy's professional career in jeopardy by having him send a false statement to another judge.
I like that rewrite.
I like your ending quite a bit. I also like this ending because it's that the mentor has his back. This mentor who, we know that he was important to Vinny early on, but we're not sure how important Vinny was to him. And then when we hear that he's still in his corner, like I shed a single tear. It's like, that's nice, but you're right. It's a lot of stakes that he's willing to go to for such a silly thing.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, could Vinny have legitimately practiced? Could he have defended his cousin? He was a lawyer. He's a real lawyer. It's not like Suits.
That's a good point. He's not totally a fraud. Like, he's
never you have to have your first jury trial at some point, though.
It would reveal that he was lying to the judge the whole time.
Well, he lied to the judge, and that's obviously a problem. But had he told the truth and filled out the proper paperwork, assuming he had done all those things, the fact that he's only been an attorney for 6 weeks and has never seen a trial or done anything in criminal law, the judge could not have let him. could not have let him represent, Stan and Bill. It couldn't have done that because it's ineffective assistance of counsel and it's reversal. You can't put him out there. This guy's going to be a stumble bum, which he started out as. But he was lied to. The Alabama process is not as informal as they showed it, but it's far more relaxed than it is in most states, which I was very surprised to find out. But I just can't see Judge Malloy putting his entire professional career on the line at the end like that.
Yeah. Brian mentioned a moment of the ending that choked him up, but the one that really gets me is when Ralph Macchio is like trying to express his gratitude and is like breaking down as he does it. That's the moment that gets me choked up at the end. It's like, because you think about it, he's like, he really has saved his life. It's like he can go on and live his life. This charge was dismissed. He was found not guilty. And now the air is cleared for him. So.
Yeah, but you just notice how Vinny's trying to get out of there. He has to get out of there fast. And there's a shot that you probably didn't notice, but there was a shot just before they come out of the courthouse that shows the courthouse clock, and it's 5 minutes to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And 3 o'clock was the time when the judge was expecting a fax from New York. So, that's why Vinny knows it's 5 minutes to 3, and the courthouse clock shows you. It starts out showing that, and then it pans back down with everybody coming out of the courthouse. It's a really nice scene, but we've been set up because the judge said, well, they weren't there, and they'll get back to me at 3 o'clock. So he knows he's got to get the hell out of there. So he can't do his victory lap like, normally would happen. And Trotter's trying to tell him congratulations and, maybe we can get together again. And the judge telling him, you may be unorthodox, but what the heck? That's why I said I prefer my ending. And I think that may have been one of the thoughts because I just can't see Judge Malloy doing that, even if he did like Vinny a lot, which he apparently did because he came to his graduation. The whole thing, though, is that you look at that, and the next time you watch it, look for the courthouse. It starts out with the clock on top of the courthouse, 5 to 3, and then pans down, and Vinny knows, I got to get out of here.
Yeah, and Vinny is even trying to brush off Macchio, and he's like, look, collect your thoughts and give me a call.
Yeah, that's right, so, he's got to get out of there, and you get the impression, these people are all saying things, I got to get out of here, and Lisa's down there in the car waiting for him. She's pulled the car around. But they got to get out of town. And Vinny doesn't know what Lisa has done to get Judge Malloy to intercede for him. But anyhow, in question, would the judge have allowed him to represent if he had known the truth? And the answer is likely not. He wasn't experienced. He didn't have the wherewithal.
One last thought on the ending. So I have a theory I've developed about movies is that if you don't know what the last shot of your movie should be, you can pretty much never go wrong with 2 people driving off into the distance.
Yes.
Like I can't think of an example of a time when that was the last shot of a movie and I walked away saying, I wish they'd ended that movie differently. Like that's always the perfect ending to a movie. So this ends with Vinny and Mona Lisa driving off into the distance. I was like, that's your final shot. That's perfect right there. So
it is, except for we know that Lisa's going to get her way.
Of course.
He owes her big time, and she's going to have that church wedding, and there's not going to be a spontaneous elopement here. So, but even that, she says, you didn't win your case, you needed help.
And they have some good banter there at the end, yeah.
Yes, it's good.
And then over the credits, there's like this original song that's telling the story of My Cousin Vinny. So
I've never paid attention to it. That's funny. I didn't know that it did that.
That's very 90s.
Yeah.
It would be even more 90s if it was a rap song.
A Will Smith interlude. Which actually I read a factoid on Wikipedia. It said early on there was talks that one of the young men who get mixed up would potentially have been Will Smith.
Whoa.
That's right. That's right. They were thinking originally of having Will Smith, but then they didn't want to bring in a racial issue. You have enough issues with, fish out of water, but not race.
I think that was smart.
I mean, it's about ethnicity. You have Italians and Jews in white Alabama. The other thing I've noticed, there are a lot of black characters around the periphery.
Yeah, that's true.
Which is no. I mean, I think it's not. I mean, it's kind of like local character. It doesn't pass the Blackdale test. in which you do not have two named black characters talk to each other about something other than race. I don't know. I haven't found the definition. You do not have two named black characters, but you have a lot of them, including one of the primary witnesses to the alleged murder. Or is it a real murder? So,
The glasses lady, right? Is she black?
Yeah, I have to check my glasses. But I'm pretty sure she was black.
Yes.
My black dar went off. What it's looking at?
I don't. Okay,
But there were black.
you don't need any
jurors.
sort of radar
Yeah,
to determine
you
if
have
somebody
one.
is.
Well, it's an onion. It's an onion. It's an onion article.
Oh, okay.
The guy talking about his black dar. We could put that. We could put that in the channel under the podcast media.
Yeah.
I will fish that classic out.
But that's My Cousin Vinny.
Yeah,
Right.
we did it.
So now I'm glad that you guys made me watch it because, like I said, I don't like courtroom comedies, and this was more than a courtroom comedy.
How many courtroom comedies are there? I'm struggling to think of another one.
Liar, liar.
Okay.
Mm.
I was thinking about Liar Liar. So you're negative on Liar Liar.
I was thinking of Life of Brian. That's all I could think of.
No.
And I like that barely counts. I'm pretty sure Duck Soup has a court scene. But that's
Actually, no, they never did. The Marx Brothers never did a courtroom drama, which to me is amazing because it's a perfect vehicle for their type of silliness. So they didn't do it, so the Stooges, did. And of course, the Stooges comedy is a Stooge comedy. It's going to be stupid. But the Marx Brothers, it would have been fun if they had done a courtroom, but they never did.
I can imagine Groucho doing some banter, like talking to a witness or while he's on the witness stand or something. I definitely could see that. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you could see that. And it wouldn't be surprised if Harper weren't the judge because, sure, he doesn't speak. So justice can be both blind and, in this case, unable to speak. But no, it would have been a great vehicle for them. And I'm surprised the Marx Brothers never did a comedy involving a courtroom. But the damn Stooges did.
only 15 minutes, Dad. It's only 15 minutes long. It's not Titanic.
Seems like it.
Given that the framing for selecting this movie was that My Cousin Vinny is often heralded as an essential courtroom film, not just because it's entertaining, but because it's a better representation than many courtroom movies are of what actually happens in a jury trial. I got to ask you, Kevin, where does this rank among most accurate courtroom movies, and what would you say is the most accurate that you can think of?
That's kind of hard to say. The most accurate, to be honest with you, the most accurate courtroom film that I've ever seen was Kramer versus Kramer.
Okay.
With Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep. And of course, that doesn't deal with criminal law. It deals with family law. The verdict, was, again, that's a civil case. Paul Newman was in the verdict. So, and of course, the courtroom drama that I saw as a kid that most affected me was To Kill a Mockingbird, which also takes place in Alabama. With Gregory Peck playing Atticus Finch. I mean, Atticus Finch is, is like a god to the profession of attorney. It's like he's real. So he's one of those people that's taken on a persona itself. But this one right here is I don't put him quite in that category because it is a comedy. However, as far as the end of the movie, the presentation of the evidence, the legwork that he finally put in when he got off his dead ass and went out there and started talking to witnesses and taking pictures. When he started doing the legwork, that's how a lot of things are won by doing the legwork. And then he was able to finally find a way to resonate with the jury, despite the fact that you have these regional and cultural differences, not to mention language, Utes. So,
All time.
That was also funny when the judge said, "Let the record show that he's holding up two fingers."
That was a good gag.
That was funny.
One last question, and then we can rate. So here he's found that it's dismissed. They're actually not found not guilty, but I guess it's dismissed. The prosecution dismisses the charges. They drop the charges, I guess. So maybe there's a distinction between dropped and dismissed, but I guess they're not pursuing it anymore.
Yeah, dismissing the charges could be involuntary. In this case, it's not involuntary. the prosecutor, Jim Trotter III, realizes that they also have enough stuff to follow up that there's a mistake that's been made here. But like I said, there were things that were missed along the way, including the top of the car, the convertible. That just sort of surprised me from the beginning. The tire tracks, all those things. It was well put together. As I said, this was a well written movie that was well acted. So, and I did enjoy it.
So my question is, I don't know this. I probably could Google it and find out, but what percentage of criminal cases ultimately return a guilty verdict that go to trial? Is it like it's assumed you probably are going to get a guilty if you end up going to trial? Or is it something of a coin flip? Or is it like, I don't know. I'm just kind of curious.
Well, this is going to sound cynical, but it really depends upon how wealthy you are.
Okay.
I'm sorry, that sounds cynical, but you can drag things out forever and ever and get actually a good deal if you got the money for it. There's a very cynical statement that the presumption is not, you're presumed innocent until found guilty. We've all heard that. But the reality is that you're presumed guilty until proven influential.
This is America.
So, I mean, that's somewhat cynical. So I can't answer your question. I can tell you, though, that an indigent defendant has a greater chance of being found guilty than a wealthy person facing the same charge.
Particularly with a pro bono lawyer service with
Exactly.
6 weeks experience.
Well,
So-
you don't have the money to go out and take the depositions and do a lot of the other stuff, psychiatric examinations. You got to go hat in hand to the court and beg them, and that comes out of the court's till. So they're not real thrilled about doing things like that. So you're at a disadvantage.
Okay. Well, is it good? It's our signature section where we each give the movie a rating on our 8-point goodness scale, ranging from very not good, which is a 1 out of 8, to our masterpiece rating, toward a good, which is an 8 out of 8. Gavin, why don't you lead us off? Is My Cousin Vinny good?
I think as I watched this film, it kind of defies categorization for me. As we call it a comedy, it begins with a murder, and it has a lot of like court comedy. I don't think is a clearly established subgenre of comedy film, and it also has kind of elements of romantic comedy to it. It's like the arc between Vinny and Marisa Tomei is a little bit like a romantic comedy. So like what I'm saying is that this is a special film. The writing, I think, is top notch, and it is anchored by 3 perfect performances. I think the 3 leads are all in a dead heat for best in show. Marisa deserved that statue, and if there was a statue for a casting director, they would have deserved it. This was the first year for ensemble, right, or something like that. Yeah. They should have that. It should have been available for this film. I was deeply impressed by it. I was laughing quite a bit. I'm going to give it a perfect score. This is a toward the good.
All right.
I can think of very few things I would change about it. I said it was dead on balls accurate. For those who say it's flawless, it's not flawless literally, but it's close to it. It's pretty close to it. Very few things I would change.
All right, I guess I'll go next. I don't know if we gave proper flowers, gave proper airspace to the exchange when Marisa Tomei is on the witness stand. It's just, for me, it's in the Hall of Fame of great comic sequences, but not just comic sequences, but things that impact the plot, consequential comic sequences. It's elevated so much by the delivery, but the writing is so fresh. The cast chemistry, the delivery, that's the scene that won her the Oscar. And if that's the scene you're going to go by, she absolutely deserved the Oscar. I love her performance here, but Pesci, Gwynn, even the supporting performances are so good. You have, I forget the name of the actor who plays the prosecuting attorney, but he has some really funny and like, he's just kind of over the top and, but like in a way that, yes, you believe he's a good old boy, And just, it's pretty much every bit of casting is pitch perfect and bit of line delivery is great. I think I've aired my handful of grievances with the film. I think it's a good movie until it turns into a great movie. And I'm less here for the more farcical stuff that happens early with there's a couple of moments we've talked about. And I really wish they had figured out a way, as we talked about, it just felt a little contrived that both Vinny and Mona Lisa figured out, like, if Mona Lisa should have been the one that actually figured it out. I wish they could have made that happen, but I think with the way that the trial proceeds, you just couldn't have. I can't see an easy rewrite to make that work. So to me, it's like kind of teetering on the edge of exceptionally good and a toward a good masterpiece, then 8 out of 8. And I think I've kind of in the past hesitant to pull the trigger on it because there are moments that I just don't that where I feel like or like it needs to kind of build up steam. But the good parts are just so good that I just love them so much. It's unique, it's quotable, it's expertly written, well made. I mean, it's not like a masterpiece of craft or anything like that, but it's well produced, it looks nice. It's the kind of movie they don't make too often anymore. Like the mid-budget adult comedy drama, like that just doesn't happen that often anymore. And I'm gonna just finally give it its proper due and bring it into the masterpiece territory just over the finish line on the strength of stuff like Magic Grits and My Biological Clock is Ticking, and above all, Marisa Tomei's final appearance on the witness stand. So that's me.
Okay. I was wondering.
Who next?
I can go next. Yeah, certainly the movie is not without its flaws. But then again, I was asked to look at the movie, from a legal perspective. And so, yes, I'm looking for flaws. But overall, this is a movie that, I've already said before, it's well written and it's well acted that brings out how well written it really is. And so from that standpoint, it's really good. I like the way it eventually wrapped up. But here's an interesting question for you. First off, this movie has lots of subtleties in it, things that people don't pick up. Some of those we talked about here, like which way the getaway car would have gone. Little things like that, or the fact that the three witnesses were identifying a mint green Buick Skylark 1964 from a black and white photo, or the fact that the top was up when it never was up. But here's the other thing. When Vinny comes outside the courtroom, because he's got 3 minutes to get her in there, she's talking on the phone. Who's she talking to?
Malloy.
She's talking to Malloy. She's talking to Judge Malloy because she knows the time is running out. So she's not entirely hostile. She's ticked off at Vinny because of the brusque manner that he showed when she tried to show him the photographs. But she was talking to Malloy. So that's the only person she could have been talking to. But it's those little subtle things that let us feel things in. From that standpoint, when I look at the movie from a Gestalt perspective entirely, realizing that it's primarily a comedy, but with serious overtones, I can't disagree, with Dan and Gavin about this movie. It's in the masterpiece category. And I'm sorry that I didn't see it back in 1992.
All right, Brian, bring us home.
I'm glad we've brought this meeting of the minds together. I don't know who we're going to say was officially the selector for this film. We got a spreadsheet of, okay, who is responsible for this episode happening? But I knew it had to happen. When I heard that you hadn't seen it, Kevin, I knew this had to be somewhere down the way this would transpire. And I'm going to actually rebut Dan. This is a masterpiece of craft. Because so many things play into it. I mean, it's the costuming so that they can fight over the outfit. It's the camera focus on the owl, and the owls. There must have been like an animal trainer or something, because they made the owl who screech on cue. And so many good actors, like even the supporting cast, as some of you have said, like are memorable character actors. Like each witness does a good job. The fact that there's no villains, that it seems like everybody is operating in good faith, and maybe they've just formed wrong assumptions, which this story says is possible. You can misjudge a book by its cover. Once upon a time, this was a script that was passed across somebody's desk, and I can just picture that moment in my head of, imagine that you're the person who gets handed the My Cousin Vinny script. It's like it's almost perfect. I would have to look for things to pick apart, and like maybe I have questions about the title. Like I really like True Grit. I think I want an alternate poster. If there were an alternate poster for that title, Gavin, I would pay for Letterboxd Premium or whatever lets you swap around the poster icon. But great film. I'm glad we got to talk about it. I give it an 8 also, which that's got to be the highest scoring film we've done because it's got 4 8s.
Is it 32? Wow.
32.
That has to be a first. This is a first in the goods history, is it?
Breaking ground. Cool.
Have you ever had a show where with a third guest where all three of you guys gave 8s? Because 16s are pretty rare.
I'm not sure we've ever had a 3-8.
I'd have to go look. This has been awesome. Thank you very much, Gavin and Kevin, for joining us. We definitely like to have you guys again sometime. I'm glad we got to talk about one of our favorite movies. Excellent comedy. Brian, I'm glad you gave one last shout out to the justice in the sense of everybody wants the best. And once they realize what the best is, they act accordingly. No villains. I like that a lot too. I'm glad that you repeated that because I think there's a character, and I mean that in the sense of like a dignity to this film, in addition to just being hysterical and so well made. On that note, thank you guys very much.
Great to have you back.
All right. Have a good evening, everybody.
Good night.
Right.